to A Well-Designed Business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. Before I introduce my guest today, I want to remind you the summer 2021 semester of Luann University starts next week, right after the 4th of July holiday. I know you are busy. I know it is summer. I also know you need to continue working on your business to achieve the goals you have. Check it all out at luannuniversity.com. All right, joining me today is Paul Dashevsky. Paul, along with his partner, Jon Grishpul, are the co-founders of GreatBuildz. Between the two, they have decades of experience in the real estate and construction industries. They've seen enough renovation nightmares that they decided it was enough, that there had to be a better way. So they dedicated themselves to helping people find and hire the best contractors for their projects, and GreatBuildz was born. Today, GreatBuildz revolutionizes the industry. It makes it so much easier for you designers, homeowners, and contractors all over Southern California to do a better job the first time out, right? Today, Paul is with us to give us his best practices so that you can also vet and interview contractors for your projects like a pro. This is a pen and paper show, just giving you fair warning. Okay? Ready? Let's get going. Hey, Paul, thank you so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Thanks for having me, Luann.
So, Paul, I'm looking forward to the conversation because any time we have someone that has, in particular, build and construction background, but also your background includes real estate, this expertise helps designers and informs designers on the things that they do to attract working with a builder, the things that they do to deliver when working with a builder or a contractor and a realtor so that they can up their game and get more referrals. So really looking forward to this today. So thanks for being with us.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I wanted to start with, we're going to talk about your new company, their company GreatBuildz, and I'm going to pick that apart a little bit. But right now, I want to go right to something that I learned about GreatBuildz. In your company, you describe that for your clients, you have established a 10-step vetting process for contractors. So a contractor, in order to be listed on GreatBuildz, has to go through your 10-step vetting process, and they have to, I guess, adhere to or meet your 20-step code of conduct. And I thought to myself, if you would tell us what that is, that would be so awesome, because any designer listening that is literally about to interview a contractor, this is like the go to the head of the class cheat sheet card on the questions and the things to ask and expect, right?
Yeah. Love to share that with you. So before I sort of jump in, GreatBuildz does do that. We're a matchmaker between homeowners that want to renovate and contractors. And so when we pair those two up, we want to make sure we give them a contractor recommendation that we could stand by, someone we'd recommend to our moms and dads and cousins. The second problem that we saw when we started GreatBuildz was that people pick contractors based on two things, almost invariably. One is price. We all want the lowest price. And number two is interesting. Number two is their gut feel. Meeting a contractor for the first time is like a first date. Yeah. And so they'll be like, I got a good gut feel about that person, or I didn't get a good gut feel. And so we thought, okay, those two are a good starting point. But like we said, that contractor is on the first date with you. They're going to be on their best behavior. So those two things are not enough. So I'm going to jump into our 10 things. I'm going to ramble them off, and we can talk more about which ones you want to dive into. But we do 1, management interview. 2, we call references. 3, we check their work experience. 4, we do run a background check. 5, we look at their financial, do a financial review. 6, we look at their online reviews and ratings. 7, we check with the contractor state license board to make sure they're licensed and there's no derogatory issues on their license. What are we on? 8, we check how long they've been licensed, make sure they're bonded, and get a copy of their insurance. Number 9, we make sure that they have local expertise, figure out where they work and what they understand about the locality that the project's in. And number 10 is we have them sign that 20-point code of conduct that you referenced earlier. So that's our 10-step process.
Well, this is awesome. You see, and now we could probably just hang up and say, hey, go run to the races with this, or we could talk it apart a little bit. No, I mean, honestly, it's so funny because, I work with my cousin Eileen Hahn and also Jessica Harling, and these women are hiring experts, right? So for when we want to build our individual teams and our companies. And, Paul, my husband and I've had a business for almost 40 years now. And you know how many people I've hired off and on through the years, and yet in the last 5 or 6 years that I've worked closely with each of these women, when they have given me this, hey, Lou, these are the 10 things you should ask people on an interview, I'm always like, wow, how did I miss those for all these years? And so I love that because I think most of us listening would have an idea of what to ask a contractor or what to ask a contractor to show us or provide us with. But when you have it right there in black and white and we can just do a checklist, any one of us can now take this into our business. So I have a question. When you say the number 1 is the management meeting, it's what are you, I was trying to write so fast as you were talking. So was it management meeting or management? What was the management one?
Yeah, look, there's different kinds of contractors, right? And so for homeowners, oftentimes, especially with bigger contractors, the person they're meeting with could be a salesperson, could be a rep. What do we always say? We tell them that's great. As soon as they sell you the job, they're gone. They're disappeared. They're on to the next job. What do you really want? Who do you really want to meet? You really want to meet the owner of the company, right? You want to get a sense for that person. Are they honest? Are they forthright? Do they sound reputable? Or at least the project manager that's going to run your project for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, not the salesperson. But yeah, you want to have we have a series of questions, and we sit down face to face with, always for us, the owner of the company, and we want to make sure we know who that person is and not just the salesperson.
Okay. And so what that would be is these bigger remodeling and construction firms, to your point, where it might be that, I don't know, are we talking about projects where somebody might replace 25 windows in their house and the salesman comes over, but he's, to your point, once the project is running, you're never seeing him again after you sign the contract?
That's exactly right.
And does that happen with actual full renovation construction projects too? Are there contracting companies out there that would also have a salesperson sell it? Because I'm only familiar in my personal experience with, I'm meeting the guy, the guy that's going to do all the work, right?
Absolutely right. So we qualify, we separate contractors into 3 buckets. There's probably more, but 3 buckets. The smallest being kind of we call them hopefully this isn't disparaging, Chuck in a truck. It's the one-man contractor. It's him and a brother. He works out of his house. Small guy. Medium-sized contractors, oftentimes they work with family. Maybe they have a crew of 10 or 15. But the owner is on your job. You're always meeting with the owner. He runs it. That's the medium size. We love, that's a good scale. And then you have the bigger contractors where the owner is sitting in an office somewhere. He's got sales reps running around and project managers running around. So that's one question we ask. And that's one question your client should ask, or your listeners should ask or figure out is, what kind of contractor am I getting? We always ask, how many staff do you have? How many salespeople do you have? You really want to get to understand what kind of contractor you're going to be working with.
Okay. Very interesting the way you classified it. And of course, I'm obviously much more familiar with the Chuck in a Truck. That's adorable. And then the family one that has just grown a little bit. And so, but you still are always dealing with the guy or the gal. I actually had a long 25-year relationship here with a woman builder right here. And she did have, 2 or 3 project managers. But to your point, she met with every potential client. She assessed it. She priced it. She sold it, and then figured out which of her 2 or 3 teams would run that. So that's that middle level contractor, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so because communication's such a big thing, right? So there's 4 things, we could talk about that later, that can go wrong in a job. And one thing that frustrates people, oftentimes more than anything else, is communication or lack thereof. I tried to get a hold of my contractor for a day, 2 days, 3 days. I couldn't get a hold of him. We always tell people, make sure you get another point of contact, maybe a third point of contact, because contractors go on vacation too. And so, that contractor you're talking about, where that the owner is always your point person, well, they have emergencies, they have issues, they go on vacation too. Make sure you know a project manager, maybe someone at the office, maybe a wife or a spouse or a husband that you can get a hold of, because usually that person is the solo practitioner. And if you can't get a hold of them, you can't get a hold of anyone oftentimes.
Right. Love it. I love it. Okay. Very good information in there. The other thing is that when I put myself in the situation of my colleagues, my designers listening, and I'm thinking, probably, let's call it, the biggest percentage of them are going to work mostly with the Chuck in a Truck. I can't say it without laughing. And that family level business, right? So some of the bigger firms that are listening to the show, or commercial firms, may get to that other type of business. But when we think about the solo GC and this next level contracting business model, checking references and checking, a background check, I have to say, it's probably something that, do you find most designers would actually skip that step and rely on their gut and not press for, maybe references you press for, but not background check? Tell us a little bit about how important it is, even if you are meeting with that solo GC guy or that mid-level firm.
Okay, I'll put it this way. We like to have as many opportunities to vet them as possible, many points, right? So if you can get through 10 points and not find a red flag, that's a good sign that they're, a solid contractor. Because if you did all this vetting and they came out the bottom and there's no red flags, there's no issues. If you only do 2 points of vetting, you don't know if you've, thoroughly done your homework. So let's even count out the background check, because you're right, that's a pretty high level thing to do. Always call references. Yes, of course, they're going to give you the people that like them, or the ones that they were happy with the job they did. But you have to think about questions you want to ask them that will get you sort of to honesty. Like, we like to ask specifically of our references, okay, well, we understand, that they did a great job for you. If there was one thing they could have done better, and usually that will delve them into the, the one thing they did is they were a little bit delayed or whatever. So you will learn about that by kind of asking those kind of leading questions. Or was there any part of the quality that you weren't happy with? And they'll sort of start to get into that. And then the last thing I'll say is, look, if that the best way to find a contractor, GreatBuildz aside, the best way to find a contractor is to be referred by somebody that just used them within the last year and they did a good job, and you could actually see the work that was done. And if they say they were happy with them, that's already a great sign. So that is probably the highest level of vetting you could do. But if you just, if you weren't referred by someone that literally hired them recently, if it was, oh, you should try this guy, I heard he's good, then you want to do as much vetting as you possibly can.
And I love that question. Is there one thing they could have done better? Right? That's a great question, because it doesn't feel like the person who wants to give a good reference is throwing somebody under the bus. They're not feeling completely disloyal. And they might say the tiniest little thing. And for you, as the one listening to it, could say, oh, that wouldn't have bothered me at all. Or for you listening, could say, well, that was tiny for them, but that would be a deal breaker for me. Right?
Everyone's got a different personality, right? Yep, and that's another sort of tip. that we do that I recommend, designers think through is we know everyone's got a different personality. So we always try to match up our clients with three, call them different contractors. Different could mean different styles, different types of communication, different sizes, small, medium, large, because every person's going to decide for themselves who they feel most comfortable with. And then it could be their decision. You never want to push a contractor on somebody and say, oh, this person's the best person for you. We don't know that. We want to give them a plethora of choices and see who they connect with. We don't, as people, we don't connect with everyone. So give them some options and they'll probably connect with someone. Make sure all three of those options are good, that no matter who they pick, they're going to be with a solid contractor, and then they could pick from those three.
That's interesting. And that's an interesting point, too, that a designer could take to their own businesses. We all have our go-to trades and vendors. And, but to have maybe two contractors that you really, what I mostly find designers saying is, I have my A contractor and my B contractor. And I either funnel them based on project and price or availability or whatever. But to have more than one A contractor and then to, feel like it's just like when the designers say the bigger firms, the principal will interview the client and then they'll look at their project management teams and assign it based on the team that they think has the right culture to fit with that incoming client. So kind of an interesting concept there too.
Right. I always think so. I mean, I think, sometimes you could put a female contractor in front of someone and an older contractor that's been doing it for 30 years and maybe, someone that's younger or has a newer license or whatever it is. And you just don't know who they're going to connect with. And so I always say give them the options. And frankly, I think for our clients and for anyone's clients that we should give them a couple different bids, right? I mean, that's a whole nother, topic we could talk about, but I'm always amazed when you give a client three contractors or a client calls three contractors and for the same project, the same kitchen that they're envisioning, and one is 40,000, another one is 65,000, the other one's 80,000. And the client's like, I don't get it.
How can this be?
How could this possibly be? So you got to give them multiple bids just so they, can figure out what's best for them.
And that's a tough thing because as you said, it happens a lot. And logically, something is different between the 40 and the 85,000. It's just getting to the clarity on what that is, right?
There's a lot of work that goes into that, and we help our clients. And I think designers might get involved in this is helping spread the bids, meaning making sure that they have all the same inclusions, right? Some bids have almost nothing in them, no material. Other bids have a bunch of allowances for material. So you gotta squish them together and piece them apart and make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And then once you do all that, we inform our clients. Look, there's some reasons why some contractors might be more expensive. They might have a bigger shop that might allow more oversight for your job. They might spend more on marketing. Obviously, the small guys can work out of their house, and the bigger contractors have office space. So, of course, they're going to be different. It's like anything you buy. You could buy a $20,000 car. You can buy an $80,000 car. So cheapest isn't always best. Sometimes you can't afford to. We tell people you can't afford to go with the cheapest contractor because there's a reason they're the cheapest, and it's not going to work out maybe necessarily great, but not always, right? Sometimes the cheapest guy is fine. So that's why you do all that vetting, and then you compare the bids and spread them, and then just educate your client on, some contractors are more expensive. And if they're really way more expensive, oftentimes that means they're busy. They don't really need your job, and they're only going to do it if it pads their pockets.
Right. Well, I mean, look, especially the current climate that we're in right now, it's sort of like the phone just keeps ringing. There has to be a way to say no without saying, I don't want to work with you sometimes.
Exactly. That's right.
So it's a legit thing, right? And then the other thing is, asking for references is not the same as doing a background check. And, there's services out there, $80 a year, where you can get a pretty good, decent background check. And what's interesting, Paul? Just yesterday, I was at a funeral. and I was at the funeral luncheon and sitting across from a couple that I had never met before. Turned out that they came up to visit from Florida because it was their happened to be the gentleman's sister that passed away. And so you know me, Miss Shy. I'm like, hi, what's your name and where are you from and what do you do and all the things. And do you know what the story yesterday? They moved to Florida 6 years ago to retire, and they get there, they buy a piece of property, they gave a contractor $70,000 to the deposit to build a house, and he ran off with the money. And from there, they told the story of, and you know what the end of the story is? They go to court, and it turns out that he's done it. If he did it to them, it turns out that he did it to others. And so there was obviously a group class action, whatever. I'm using legal words like I know what they mean now, right? But I'm just saying a group suit. And you know what the end up is 7 years later? Do you know that they're getting their restitution? Do you know what they get every single month?
Uh-oh.
$7.38 a month. $7.38 a month is their payout. And, this gentleman and his wife explained to me, he said, look, I was going to move to Florida and retire. He said, this didn't prevent us from being able to build our home, a modest modular home. It didn't prevent us from being able to build our home. He said, but it's 7 years later and I have not yet retired. And that was the impact on him. And he said, there were others that literally lost their life savings and had to, not have a new home built. And so the background check, you're not necessarily going to catch everything, but if somebody's done something once or twice, it will show up, right?
Right. And I, again, do as much checking as you possibly can. And I hate these types of stories because frankly, we have to remember this industry that we're in, that we're in when working with contractors specifically, we're in a very unique niche. And what I mean by that is when I decided to start GreatBuildz, one of the reasons or the impetus that I had for starting GreatBuildz is I found this statistic that just sort of haunted me. Angie's List did a survey a couple years back interviewing homeowners that renovated. If you could believe it, 52% of those people were dissatisfied with their renovation or contractor. So this time of your life where you're supposed to be so excited and so happy that you have this beautiful new home or whatever it is that you did, you were dissatisfied with the experience or the contractor. I don't know any other business, maybe short of politics, where half the people are always unhappy. I mean, people buy shoes, not 50% of them are unhappy with their shoe purchase. So we are in this crazy, crazy business. And sort of the other piece of it is, this weird relationship that we don't think about that I've written on in our blogs about, which is contractors have this huge amount of knowledge about this business, while homeowners have zero or almost no knowledge about this business. So there's this huge gap of knowledge and this disparity. And so let's face it, the dishonest contractor, the one you just referred to, can really pull the wool over the eyes of the homeowner. It's not like buying a laptop. There's no warranty. There's no Amazon to go back to, so right. It's a crazy business, and we have to just be aware of that. Use the contractors that we know are honest, reputable, high touch, good customer service guys. And if we're gonna use, or gals, and if we're gonna use a new one, let's be ultra careful that it's not the kind of person that ripped off your new friend.
Yeah, 100%, right? I mean, we even one time were last fall interviewing for a new showroom admin, and she goes through the interview process, the first pass with Eileen, and then the second pass with me, then the third pass with Kim. But then that's when we do the background and the reference check, and found out that she embezzled. This is like a regular 20-something-year-old kid that lives here in New Jersey, and she embezzled from her last job. And we're like, God. Whoa, we didn't see that coming.
So you're glad you did it, right?
Yes,
you're glad you ran the...
That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like that's like what I sort of alluded to at the beginning of the conversation. It's like I've been hiring for all these years, but doing the background check, that literal, like legit pay for the service, is not something that we did before. We do all the other things, and then it was, as you said, the gut check. Seems like a great person. Let's hire her.
It's
So
it's never enough, sadly. Yeah.
yeah, no, and it's just I think, especially for designers, as you mentioned, they're in many situations recommending the contractor, and so you really need to know who you're recommending, and it's not just because he or she is a great guy and your gut says they're a great guy. They're probably that's the sociopath, right? Can make you believe anything and have no compunction over it, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So I love this. And then just as curiosity, the licensing board step and how many years bonded. Is this public information, Paul, or is that something we have to ask them to show us and provide us?
I think it depends on where you're at. Every state
Oh,
has
in the
its own.
countries, yes.
It does. Right here in California, where GreatBuildz operates, yes, we have a great online website where we can go check, and it tells you whether they're licensed and bonded and how long they've been licensed. Another red flag for me is this is like their third or fourth company. There's other companies that have been shut down. I'm like, well, why? The
Yep.
good guys operate under the same name for 30 years, get recommended by people for 30 years, and these people have started 4 or 5 companies. Red
Mhm.
flag. I want to know about that. But it depends. Some places I know in the States don't even really require any kind of licensing. So the answer is it depends.
Okay, makes sense. And that's funny because that came up in our conversation at lunch yesterday as well. Um, there is a company that I will not name because it's still here in New Jersey. In the last 30 years, has probably opened and closed down under a different name at least 6 times that we know of. And it's exactly that. Takes deposits, does things, does crappy business, goes on and opens again as like the new place. And it's just like, oh my God, how are you guys in North Jersey not catching on to this yet? It's like crazy.
Right.
So, to your point, it's like, why are there so many reinventions of your LLC or your sub S Corp, right?
Yeah, and another thing is, we're looking for, the space is busy, the space is robust and profitable. So there's contractors coming in all the time. We're looking for someone with at least 3 to 5 years, in business. And there might be a story. It might be someone that's only been in business for 2 to 3 years, but I don't know. They've been hanging drywall for the last 10 or 15 years. They know their stuff, or they worked for dad. These businesses are great generational businesses where, yeah, I worked for my dad for 30 years, or hopefully not 30, but 5, 10 years. And now I'm doing it for myself. So there's a story, but you have to just dive deep enough and not just take someone's word for it. Because again, just remember, when you meet with them, you're on a first date. They're going to seem great, but you got to delve deeper.
Love it. I love it. And then tell us a little bit about this 20-step code of conduct. That this is where you set out for you at GreatBuildz, you set out the expectations that contractors have to adhere by. But I'm imagining there's 100% crossover to us individually, right, out here as we work with our contractors.
I think so, yeah. So, and you could find this. I'm not going to read all 20. You can find this on our website at
Oh, good.
GreatBuildz under contractor vetting, and feel free to use it. There's nothing proprietary about it. But we put together what we thought were 20 important things, and I'm sure there's things we're missing. But we make every contractor that wants to come into our network, among all the other vetting, sign this. And we want to make sure that they're going to abide by it as much as possible. And if there's an issue, we can always go back and say, hey, look, you did sign this and whatnot. Things like, I commit to hiring only qualified, experienced subcontractors who have applicable license and insurance. So we don't want them hiring people off the street. I commit to not accepting too many projects simultaneously, which can cause delays. That happens all the time, right? Let's see. There's one about having a warranty. Oh, here's one that per your comments earlier. I agree to take a reasonable deposit and collect further payments based on the project's percentage completion schedule.
Nice.
What else? There's things about communications. If I notice a potential quality issue during the project, I will alert homeowner immediately so we can discuss options to proceed or ideas to correct. We've noticed with the worst 50% of contractors, they'll just not say anything. They'll cover it up and hope that the homeowner doesn't notice. But of course, when the homeowner notices at the end of the job, it's just a much more of a nightmare to correct. We had one about, I like this one too. I agree to only use materials that are up to code and meet all industry standards for the specific project. Again, the worst 50% of contractors will use whatever's on the back of their truck instead of, using the right piece for the job. So I've seen, I used to flip homes for 10 years before this, and I've seen everything where I said, well, that's not the right screw. I have so many stories where these cheap, terrible contractors just did unbelievable work. I walked into one of my flips one time, and I looked at the paint job that they were just in the middle of finishing, and I said, there's something not right. So I started feeling the walls. They painted over wallpaper instead of peeling the wallpaper. They painted over it and hoped that I wouldn't notice. So anyways,
oh my God. Like you're not.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, really, I mean, we just, again, in Window Works just 2 weeks ago, long time, 30+ year customer of ours, just simple redo of window treatments. My grandbabies are using the room now, Luann. It's not dark enough. Let's do this. And she had the room repainted and refreshed, blah, blah, blah. Billy goes to install it. He takes down the other window treatment there. The painter did not remove the wallpaper behind the window treatment between the bracket and the top of the molding, did not paint behind there, and the new window treatment wasn't going to cover it. And so he looked at her, she looked at him, and she's like, okay, I got to get him back. And it took like weeks to get him back. And the thing is, she said to me on the phone, she goes, why would he do that? And I was like, that's a great question. It's just crazy, right?
So, well, I will. So I'll give you a little bit of a different perspective on that. I agree with you. Look, the contractor is the boss, and there's lots of crew and workers doing their thing, right? And of course, you want to hire the best crew, and hope you want a crew that won't do that, right? That will do it right. But when you have crew, and again, sometimes they're good.
Get
sometimes
done at 4:00.
Right. Exactly. Thank you for saying that. So they're not, and so it's his job or her job, the contractor's job, to make sure they're doing a quality job, but they're going to miss things too. So to me, there will always in every job be things that come up. So that's why it's the client's job to mention it, or the designer's job to mention it early, like we discussed, so they can deal with it. But to me, that's the difference between a good and a not so good contractor. Is the good contractor will fess up, say, yep, I get it, you're right, no problem, we're going to send somebody, hopefully not 2 months later, but sooner. It's the bad contractors that will argue with you, like,
right, how did I know? What, you didn't tell me that you were going to do new blinds. Like, really? I don't read your mind, you read mine. That's right. What you do, right?
Right. They'll tell you why it's not a big deal, or they'll say things like, no one will see that. They'll just make excuses. The good contractors, they want to make you happy. They want you to refer them to other clients. So they will always do whatever they can, even if they're losing money, to make you happy. And that's really the difference, is that customer service piece.
100%. We always say too, if you don't want to make a mistake today, then stay in bed. It's the only place you can be sure you won't make a mistake. Not that staying in bed isn't the first mistake, right? But you know what I mean? And the thing is, we have made some of our most loyal customers and become clients because of a mistake that we corrected. And to this point in this situation, you're right. Maybe the painting crew on site didn't know, didn't ask, figured don't ask, don't tell, who will know. But when the owner of the company was like, I can't get them back there for a couple, it was like 5 or 6 weeks. And now I'm sitting with the blinds. I don't collect my money, by the way, either, right? But it was like, it's 3 hours. You stop the train. You get a crew over there. 2 guys get it done in 3 hours. And that's where that particular contractor could have had a home run, as opposed to a foul ball, right?
Yeah, and that speaks to the importance of someone like yourself, or a designer, or GreatBuildz, kind of being the liaison. Contractors are human, even some of the good ones. We had a situation like that recently too. We have a great contractor, but he's off he's busy with new jobs, and he's got one that just, he needs to finish out. It's the last thing that always you can't get done, and he was struggling. It needed a garage door, and he was struggling to get his normal sub to get a garage door. They were having delays with materials, and so he just kept telling the client, like, we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there. And of course the client was getting frustrated. It's been months, and they don't really care about the sub's delays. And we said to the contractor, we know that this is one way to deal with it, but let's try something else. So we gave him a list of 4 or 5 other garage door subs, and we said, call these guys, vet them, you figure it out, you decide who to use, you get the materials, and just finish the darn job. So, but being that liaison that could, help the client get the work done, it really helps, because the client's kind of at wit's end. Your client or my client was kind of at wit's end with this whole garage door or thing, and they need someone like you or us to just put a fire under somebody and make it happen.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, when the clients who do choose to work with a designer, and the designer can be their advocate, that is that role. It's like the designer is like you, is able to say, there's another way to skin this cat, let's figure it out. And of course, what you're describing is when your direct consumers work with you at GreatBuildz, you're able to have that level conversation with like you said, construction guys and women know all the things they know, and we know almost none of them. But you know them too, Paul, and you at GreatBuildz knows them. So if somebody feels like they're not being heard as the consumer, then you can sift through, like, hey, like you just did in that example, the crew might not have done it, and the guy might not have known, the original contractor might not have seen it, and that's okay to have a mistake, but it's not okay to this, that, and the other thing. So it's like the voice of reason, right?
Yeah, it comes down to, I think, a designer's value in terms of customer service comes down to educating the client. Sometimes it's the delays are the client's fault, for example. So educating the client that you better pick the material. It might take months to come in, so you got to pick these things up front if you want your job done in time. And sometimes it's just it's being the liaison and helping them move things along, and sometimes it's really just being a therapist, just being willing to listen to them. It's frustrating. Anyone who's remodeled knows it's frustrating, and so they don't want to fight with their spouse, like we said, and so the designer, or us in our case, need to just be the ear and just let them vent and say, I fully understand, you're not alone. Let's think about things we should do to move things forward, and just understand from the contractor's perspective they're only human, and so on and so forth. But just listen to them. People want to be listened to, and I think that's a valuable service that a designer can provide.
100%. So much of it is just making someone feel like you heard them, that you do empathize and see actually the frustrating situation that this whole process is, right?
Yeah.
Love
That's
it.
right.
And then you mentioned something in there, when you said the value of a designer is, being the one to say and educating a client, like, I know it feels like 100 years from now since we're going to need your faucets, but it's not. These things take 8 to 10 weeks. Faucets have to be picked today in order not to hold up your bathrooms and kitchens in 3 months. And I want to just say, that is up to the designer, right? Like, Paul, the designer has to have a clear understanding of the timeline that the builder needs. And if the builder hasn't provided it, then if you are the advocate for your client, then you've got to get that. Like, when do you need this here? Because if the designer is surprised, then sort of, if I'm the consumer and I could have been surprised, you're no good to me if you were surprised too, right?
Yeah, material delays are a big problem. That's tier 2 of the things that people get frustrated with contractors is delays. And the first thing a designer, I think, should do, and we do, is kind of make sure that the client is aware that that their expectations are that there will be delays. If the contractor says, May 31st, just assume, the end of June or whatever it is. 20% delay is normal. And what's funny about that is kind of HGTV has kind of helped us with this issue, because every show I've ever watched, and I know a lot of people watch this, especially people that like to renovate, there's always a problem. There's always a delay or a cost overrun. So people know to expect this, so we can educate that with them up front about that. But then you're right about materials. Oftentimes we order material, we know it's back ordered, and okay, we know it's coming in 2 weeks, but you know what happens in 2 weeks? It's A, it's back ordered again, or
Mm-hmm.
B, the manufacturer or the ship is sitting offshore. So maybe not a bad idea to, well, one is to keep checking on it with the supplier. The designer can keep checking on it to make sure it really is coming. But number two is you might have a backup material. So hey, pick one that you really love, and order that, but maybe pick a second choice that would be your second option that is in stock or may not
Right.
take as long, so that if we come back and say, hey, that floor is out of stock for 2 months, should we just go with option two? Oftentimes the answer is yes.
Right. Well, and all of that I'm on board and totally get. But where I was actually thinking was when the job is pretty much running on schedule. So right now there's hardly any jobs running on schedule, right? Like in the middle of this post pandemic thing where just the home industry is on fire. But the regular actual, like every good contractor or builder has a timeline. And if a really good builder, like we have Brad Levitt on the show all the time, it's documented the timeline. I need these decisions. This is when this trade is coming in. This is when I. But even a chuck in a truck guy or gal, they know the rhythm of a job. And when we break ground here and when we move that wall there, at this point I need roughing for plumbing, at this point I need tile. And I just feel like too that for me, it's on us as a profession, as designers, to familiarize ourselves and to know that normal timeline too. Not to be the one coming in where the builder or the contractor is saying, so where's the rough plumbing? Oh, you need that? You know what I mean? Because without delays, that creates a delay. Without a back order, without an out of stock, if you just don't know when the actual construction timeline is and you haven't taken it upon yourself to sit that contractor down and say, give me the timeline, now you're as in the dark as the client is, right?
Oh my God, you're preaching to the choir. You better know the schedule. Yeah, and
Right.
you better have the valves, the rough-in valves, early, and the only way you can get those is by knowing what kind of shower hardware you're going to use. If you're going to use Delta, you need the Delta rough-ins. Absolutely, you absolutely have to know the progression of the job, and then one piece for materials for sure, and then one piece beyond that is, and this is where you come in as a designer, and you got to get the client engaged and sort of managing the job together is, hey, how about where are the light switches going to go? That's going to be early on in the
Mm-hmm.
project because they're going to put the electrical boxes in. Is like where where are those going to go? What about the island lights? Do you want them centered? Do you want them whatever? If you can't make those kind of decisions and literally mark them on the wall, they're going to end up wherever the worker thinks they ought to be, and you're going to be pissed, and they're going to give you a change order for changing light location. So yes, you should know all that stuff for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And it's so funny where sometimes I had that here in my office here when we were doing some renovation, and the electrician that we've used for 30 plus years, where he wanted to put the switches and what he wanted, I was like, what? No, Mike, no, like that doesn't make any sense. He's like, makes perfect sense. I'm like, not really.
If you can
So,
if you can have a checklist for yourself as a designer, right? Switches, lights. How about this one? This one sounds silly, but most kitchen sinks now have your two holes, right? Your one sink and your second sink split into two. Uh, we had a client where the garbage disposal was put in on the incorrect side. I don't know. Is there a correct side? I kind of assume that it goes on the right, but they wanted it on the left. So if that could have been on your checklist and you could have said to the client, which side do you want the disposal on? Boom. Now you mark it and you tell the guy, and that issue will never come up.
love it. I love it. And I made a note to go back and ask you because it was really sounded interesting. You said four things. You said, in like one of the sentences, you're like, there's four things that can go wrong. This is one of them. I'll get to tell you the other. So what are those four things?
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about one of them was communication.
Right.
So, of all the things, this just gets people really riled up, understandably, as non-responsive, non-communicative contractors. Like you should, if a crew doesn't show up for 3 days in a row, you're
Mm.
already frustrated. But if then you can't get a hold of the contractor, if you always go to voicemail and you can't figure out why, now you're enraged.
Yes, you
So
are.
you're enraged. So, okay, so communication's one. The other one we talked about already was delays, and that goes back to it could be material delays, not the fault of the contractor. Maybe you
Right.
didn't pick them, maybe they're back ordered. But if the crew's not showing up and it's not a material issue, then it is something with the contractor. So delays are frustrating. 20% delay is okay. 100% delay, a job that takes twice as long, not okay. Number three is this will get people. So a lot of times some contractors, again, the 50% that aren't the best, will come in and bid the lowest on the job. They'll get the job, but their intention is to ding that client with change orders all the way along. And there's nothing more frustrating going, oh, I got this great deal, and then 10, 15, 20%, 30, 40% overruns where they're going to get you for every little thing. There's just
Yep.
nothing that they find that they won't charge you for. And then whatever they ask you in terms of, this changer is $2,000. It doesn't feel like a $2,000 job, but they kind of have you over a barrel because what's your other option? It needs to be done. The other option is bringing in another contractor in the middle of the job to do this. Not ideal. And so they'll tell you, hey, that's what it costs. Not a great. So you have no negotiating leverage. So change
Right.
orders, cost overruns is another one. And then the last one is quality. Makes sense, right? The
Right.
quality that you're getting is not the quality you expected.
And so, to those last 2 points, so in order, before you get into the relationship and you sign on the dotted line, to understand if a contractor is one of those guys with a billion change orders, would that be maybe a question that when you're having that great conversation with the reference that you just say, and just tell me about change orders? Was there, a couple, a few, a lot? Like, how would you get to know that if you don't know the guy yet or the gal?
That's great. Yes, absolutely. That is probably the best way to find out early on is ask them about change orders. How much did you go over budget? You can expect they went over
Oh,
budget. You should plan for that. But
yeah.
but yeah, change orders and how much did they go over budget? One of our 20 code of conduct is I commit to charge a reasonable price for extras or change orders based on my true costs of labor, materials, and profit. I will allow homeowner 2 days to research prices to confirm my estimates are reasonable. So also, if they give you a change order, make sure it's reasonable. If you have a designer or someone like GreatBuildz on your side, you can ask them and say, hey, in your prior jobs, does installing a garbage disposal, should that cost $2,000? And then you push back. Then you push
Right.
back.
Right. And I like that question too. And of course, to your point, you can ask the contractor directly, but also asking the references. And when you say, how much did you go over budget? And if you're asking, you'd say, look, pretty much we all know in construction, it's probably going to go over budget, but do you know how much you went over budget? Because if somebody went over budget 10, what was reasonable? 10, 15, 20, what's not reasonable, Paul? Where is that like, holy moly? And of course, as I just asked it, I'm like, somebody could be knowingly like I said that I wanted, I don't know, Formica, and then I changed it to marble slab. But, how do you have that conversation?
Right, you're absolutely right. Let's remove the items that you added on. The HGTV education helps because people always find something behind their walls. That's number one. You didn't know it was there. But number two, we try to educate clients that their house that's been there for 40, 50, 60, 70 years is not perfect in and of itself. Things aren't square, where things are going to have to get leveled and whatever, rejiggered. And so, yes, there will probably be change orders. We're going to open this and we're going to find things that we need to deal with. There's a gas line in the way. That's nobody's fault. So yes, I think you should assume up to 20% that in change orders that needs to be part of your mental budget of what you can really spend. But anything beyond that, 30, 40, 50%, that's quite high.
Okay, so and that also is a great conversation for the designer to have, even once they are recommending their vetted contractor or somebody that they've done business with over and over, is to just say, listen, Just like you just said, we might open a wall and find a this, or we might up to 20% is something that you should have in your mind as a possibility. If it's less, great all day long. If it gets to be crazy pants, 30, 40, 50%, I'm going to be your bulldog and we're going to figure it out, right?
Absolutely. You want to prepare them for that. And then you want to tell them, look, the more you stay on your budget with regards to materials, the more you manage the project and keep it moving and keep making the decisions and not change your mind, right? Not, hey, and that happens too. I wanted the lights here, but now I want them here. If you change your mind, it's going to be a change order. So
Love
it's
it.
on
This
you,
is
partially on you.
right. And explaining to them, this is where you can be your own advocate in keeping to the budget. Like, don't
Right,
ask for
exactly.
16,000 revisions. I love it. All right. So we have mentioned your company, GreatBuildz, a couple of times. So GreatBuildz, you're located in Southern California. Of course, we have designers listening all over the world, but just run us through a little bit about the service that you provide.
Sure. Yeah. So we're a company that is it's a free service that connects homeowners with reliable pre-screened general contractors and then provides project support from start to finish. We noticed when I started this business the issues we talked about, which is there's just too many bad contractors out there and too many people having bad experiences. So we wanted to accomplish three things. There's a lot of ways to find a contractor. Ask around, check your junk mail, go online and start searching. There's plenty of contractors, but we wanted to sort of provide three things. We wanted to provide really rigorous contractor screenings as based on our 10-point vetting process. So if we recommended a contractor, you can feel comfortable they went through a really rigorous screening. We wanted to provide ongoing project support. So most places you find a contractor, you just find it, that's it, they're done. We wanted to be there as an ear, as a therapist, as a helper for during the project when and if it's necessary. And number three, we wanted to take a really hands-on approach to connecting clients with contractors. So just like a designer would, we would spend a bunch of time having a conversation with a client, understanding their budgets, understanding their needs, understanding their timelines, understanding what they want out of a contractor, really getting to know them in order to then make them with contractors that are the right fit. And we'll gauge it based on the kind of budget that contractor usually comes in at, whether we should match them with smaller, larger contractors. We will match them with contractors that do that kind of work. We'll match them with contractors that work in their specific area. So we just take a very curated approach to connecting them with the right pros.
I love it. It sounds like a really cool service. If I'm in the Southern California area, Paul, and I'm a designer, I'm able to avail myself of your services as well, or is it strictly for consumers?
Yeah, I mean, we work with designers all the time. Designers often, as you know, have their own crew of contractors that they like to recommend, but every once in a while there's situations where the contractors are busy, and so they'll call us up and say, "Hey, I have this client. I need one more bid. Who do you recommend?" And we'll happily recommend a contractor that could be a good fit, and vice versa. We get client calls all the time. Yes, they need a contractor, but oftentimes they also need an architect. They also need a designer.
Hmm.
We don't vet those people,
Right.
but we might say to that client, okay, based on what you're thinking, here's three designers we know that you can call, and we've heard good things about them. So we connect them and vice versa.
Okay. And so just for a little clarification in there, because if I'm a designer in Southern California, I'm thinking, wait, let me just figure this out. So I understand you said if I have a need, I need a third bid, or my guy's busy and I need to get a vetted guy, a vetted firm. I can come into your process. But can I also come into your process, find that amazing contractor that I gel with, that gets me and I get them, and then even though they might do other projects for other consumers and homeowners, they can be my go-to and I can continue to work with them on project after project? Or is that a no-no?
Yeah, I mean, we ask that designers we work with, and same with architects or real estate agents, that if you want to use them on future clients, you're welcome to, but we'd like you to connect through us, and
I see.
and we'll happily keep sending them your way. It might be a different contractor that might be a fit for your next
Right.
project, but yeah, for
Just
sure.
continue to access them through your platform. This is
That's right.
the gentleman. You get the service for free, but this is somewhere in there is how I make money. Is what I
That's
just
right.
heard.
Well, and if we
You've done all that
recommend them,
work.
well, that's right. And if we recommend them, we want to stay involved too. You can take the lead if you'd like, but we want to make sure that every couple weeks we're also touching base with the client and the contractor to make sure things are going, swimmingly.
No, I love it. And I'm thinking if I were a designer in the Southern California area to go through your process and literally end up with 3 or 4 people that I really like. And yes, I access them each time through you, but now I'm not at the mercy of my one great guy, right? My one great firm. And because we're all so busy now and we can't get people to show up. And so it's tough. But the opportunity to make that good relationship with more than one firm is what I'm saying I could see as a plus, right?
Right. It just, that's right. Especially if you're a newer designer,
Yes.
welcome that relationship for sure. We're
Plus,
here to help.
Plus, you're getting to know me. And as you said, when you have the opportunity, you're going to think of the designers that that you've gotten to know as opposed to the yellow book, right? Yellow pages.
Exactly, and everybody works in different areas. Designers want to work in there. LA is a big place. Southern California is a big place. So some designers want to work in Beverly Hills, so we'll send them to Beverly Hills clients. And same with contractors. A designer might get a job in some area, of town, Hollywood or wherever that they don't have any contractors that will go there. So we're a good resource for that because we have contractors that are all over town, if you will.
Right. Totally get it. Well, I think it's an amazing concept. I think it's awesome. It's clear that, your background in construction is coming through when you were originally going through the 10-step vetting process and actually it was the 20-step code of conduct. I thought to myself, it reminded me, we had a show a couple of months ago with April Jensen, and she created the rules of engagement for working with her firm. And it's almost like that code of conduct. You could see it as you were reading it. Commit to hire qualified subs, commit to not accepting too many projects, agree to be reasonable, a reasonable deposit and payment structure. I was like, these are all the things that he has learned are the things that go wrong. And so we're just going to reverse engineer the most amazing contractor by filtering out all the crap that happens, right?
So true. That's a really good point. I never even thought about it that way, but there's so many things that have gone wrong that we tried to do that. But look, contractors are only human.
Oh, yeah.
And, so.
No, I mean, listen, I know that you know that contractors are your lifeblood of your business, and for designers as well. This isn't a bashing session on contractors, but it is a challenge for an interior designer to vet a good contractor, and there are things that happen that catch us up short that we didn't know to ask or didn't know to check. And it's really helpful to have all of your tips so that we can use it when we go out and want to find that best person for our clients. So amazing. Thank you so much, Paul, for just sharing all of that with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So okay. So tell just like for designers that are in your area, how do they find you?
Yeah, sure. They can check out the website at www.greatbuildz, one word, GreatBuildz. So it's a Z at the end. That's where we got quirky with it, greatbuildz.com. And then I'm at Paul at greatbuildz.com is my email. Feel free to reach out that way.
Love it. Well, thank you, Paul, for sharing your expertise. I'm sure it will help some designer out there that is about to go into an interview process and think, oh, thank goodness, I know what to ask.
Thanks, Luann. Pleasure being with you.
So good, right? I love these tips. I love having the cheat sheet of what we need to know before we place our money and our clients' money, as well as our trust in a contractor. And of course, we can never really know if someone is 100% legit. Things happen, like my new acquaintances last week that I mentioned in the show, right? But how much better informed would you be? Would they have been if they were able to follow Paul's advice before putting their money down? right? You want to be able to put your contractors through these paces. Literally, this was born of him and his partner John's years of experience. And it does remind me of Kat Anderson's class in Lou University, Design Build 201. She built this class from all the mistakes, all the lessons that she has learned from being on construction sites for the last 15 plus years. It also reminds me of when I talk with seasoned designers about their contracts. They're always saying, yep, my contract changes and grows and revises all the time. I make those revisions based on the problems that I have, and then I change my contract so that the next time I can prevent that from happening again, right? And so this is the thing. So this is what these two men have done. They've taken all of that and they've put it together into GreatBuildz. And I know that I encourage you to have pen and paper ready for this one because, you never know what other ideas you might have gotten from what Paul was sharing. But don't forget, you can get the actual 10-step vetting process and their 20-step code of conduct at GreatBuildz, BUILDZ, right? GreatBuildz.com/contractor-vetting. Now, while you're on their website, I highly encourage you to go through their blog. I was going through the blog. They have a ton of info there. Titles like Best Bathroom Addition Tips. How do you compare bids from different contractors? Lots of good information there to help you be more knowledgeable in this area of your business, okay? And if you are a longtime listener of the show, this conversation probably reminded you of the episode with Gene Brownhill of Sweeten, right? This was episode 422. Gene is the founder of Sweeten, and that's it's SWEETEN. And Gene is a heck of a smart lady, and it's a good show to go back to, okay? Similar concepts between what GreatBuildz does and what Sweeten does. There are nuanced differences, but my thought is, especially if you're not in the Southern California region and you like this idea of being connected with reliable contractors, then Sweeten may be the answer for you, okay? So check it out. Check out that. That's episode 422. All right. Big thank you to My Doma Studio for making the podcast possible through their sponsorship. Please, if you are looking for the one place to manage your projects, your communication with clients and vendors, your invoicing, all the things, My Doma Studio makes it easy for you by having it in one place. Go to mydomastudio.com/a well-designed business. And a big thank you to you too for showing up every week and doing this with me. I am very grateful that you do. Decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at luannigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.